Fire has always been more than just a tool. It is a living mystery that our ancestors worshipped, feared, and tried to command. This journey uncovers 30 of history's most astonishing sacred fires, stories where a single flame could protect an empire, deliver a prophecy, or defy the laws of nature itself. You will discover how eternal flames shaped the fate of civilizations and why some of these ancient mysteries still baffle scientists today. We will see a fire that burned for 1,000 years without going out, and another that was said to be lit inside a human heart. How did a simple element become the ultimate symbol of the divine? Our first mystery burns in the very center of ancient Rome. Within the circular temple of Vesta, a flame flickered that was not merely a symbol, but the literal heartbeat of the empire. This was the sacred fire of the hearth goddess, and Romans believed its fate was inextricably tied to their own. If the flame burned bright, Rome prospered. If it sputtered and died, catastrophe was sure to follow. The unimaginable responsibility for keeping this fire alive fell to a select group of women, the Vestal Virgins. Chosen as young girls from Rome's most noble families, they entered a life of immense privilege and staggering pressure. For 30 years, they would live within the temple complex, sworn to absolute chastity and dedicated to a single sacred duty. They were the keepers of the flame. The rituals were precise and constant. The fire could never be allowed to die. It was fed only with specific sacred woods. It was tended with meticulous care, shielded from drafts and watched in unending shifts. The penalty for letting the fire go out was not just a reprimand, it was a public flogging for the Vestal on duty, a sign that she had failed the city itself. But why such severity for a simple flame? This was no ordinary fire. It was considered the living soul of the Roman state, a direct connection to the divine protection of Vesta. It represented the continuity of Rome, the warmth of its communal hearth, and the light of its civilization. The flame was so sacred that when it was ritually extinguished and rekindled each year on the 1st of March, the new fire had to be created in the most ancient way possible, by focusing the sun's rays with a bronze mirror. This act of creation linked the modern empire to its most primitive roots. For over 1,000 years, through wars, plagues, and the rise of emperors, that flame was a constant. What secrets of maintenance did these priestesses pass down through generations? It was more than just fuel and vigilance. It was a sacred science, a profound understanding of airflow, of ember banking, of reading the mood of a fire like one reads a living thing. Their success is a historical marvel, a single thread of light stretching across a millennium, holding the fate of the world's greatest empire in its glow. But the sacred fires of Rome were not the only flames that spoke. Far to the east, on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, a different kind of fire smoldered beneath the earth, and its breath was said to hold the voice of the gods themselves. This is the mystery of the Oracle of Delphi. Here, in a temple dedicated to Apollo, a single priestess known as the Pythia would enter a small, enclosed chamber. She would sit upon a tripod stool positioned over a crack in the stone floor, a chasm from which strange, sweet-smelling vapors would rise. After rituals that involved chewing sacred laurel leaves and the presence of a perpetual hearth fire, she would breathe in these fumes. What followed was a terrifying and awe-inspiring transformation. The Pythia would fall into a violent trance, her body convulsing, her voice becoming guttural and distorted. From this state of utter possession, she would utter fragmented, often riddling prophecies. For centuries, kings and commoners alike journeyed to Delphi, offering lavish gifts for the chance to hear her words, which would then be interpreted by temple priests to guide the fate of nations, wars, and personal destinies. The question that has echoed through time is simple. What was really happening in that chamber? Was this pure divine inspiration or something more earthly? Modern science has ventured into this ancient mystery. Geological surveys of the site have revealed that two fault lines crossed directly beneath the temple. In the late 20th century, archaeologists and geologists proposed that the vapors described in ancient texts could have been ethylene, a sweet-smelling hydrocarbon gas, or perhaps methane, rising from the limestone bedrock. Both gases are known to produce states of euphoria, disorientation, and trance when inhaled in concentrated doses. The sacred fire burning in the chamber may have played a crucial and terrifyingly practical role. Its heat could have drawn these lighter-than-air gases up from the fissure, creating the intoxicating plume the Pythia breathed. So were the prophecies of Delphi a product of divine contact or ancient psychoactive chemistry? The answer may be that, to the ancient mind, there was no difference. The intoxicating breath of the earth was itself considered a divine gift, a sacred fire from the underworld that opened a doorway to the god. The rituals, the laurel leaves, the eternal flame, all were part of a carefully orchestrated technology of transcendence. This was not fraud, but a profound understanding of the intersection between the physical world and the human spirit. The oracle did not just predict the future, she channeled the very fumes of the planet, a living testament to the idea that the sacred could rise quite literally from the cracks in the ground. While the oracle channeled the earth's hidden fires, another tradition sought to create a flame of absolute, unblemished purity. In the ancient Persian religion of Zoroastrianism, fire is not just a symbol of the divine, it is the very essence of God's light and wisdom on earth, a sacred force that fights against darkness and falsehood. The most revered of these are the Atash Bayrams, or victorious fires. To call them eternal flames is an understatement. Their creation is one of the most elaborate and arduous rituals in the history of religion. Imagine a fire so holy that it cannot begin as a single spark. The consecration of an Atash Bayram requires the painstaking collection and purification of 16 different types of fire, each representing a different aspect of creation and human endeavor. Priests would gather fire from a lightning strike, a symbol of celestial power. They would collect flames from a funeral pyre, representing the transition of the spirit. They would take fire from a potter's kiln, a blacksmith's forge, and a baker's oven, honoring the crafts that build civilization. Even fire from a shepherd's hearth was included, acknowledging the most humble of professions. Each of these fires underwent a year-long purification process. They were consecrated in separate rituals, then slowly merged one by one over the course of a full year. The final, supreme fire was a fusion of all these earthly and heavenly sources, a living tapestry of the entire world, distilled into a single, perfect flame. Once lit, the duty to maintain it was monumental. It burned in a special inner sanctum attended by priests who underwent rigorous purification themselves. They wore white muslin masks over their mouths and special tools to tend the fire, ensuring not even their breath would pollute its sacred essence. These flames became anchors of the faith. Some, like the Arancha Atash Bayram in Advada, India, are believed by followers to have been burning continuously for over 1,200 years, a literal beacon of their community through persecution and exile. But what does such an intricate ritual truly mean? This is not just about keeping a light on. It is a profound philosophical statement. By weaving together fire from the sky and fire from the hands of a baker, the religion declares that the divine is present in every facet of existence, from the spectacular to the mundane. The sacred is not separate from the world. It is the sum of all its parts, purified and unified. The eternal flame is therefore a map of the universe and a mirror of the ideal human soul, a single point of light composed of countless experiences, endlessly burning against the encroaching dark. This quest for a pure and eternal flame finds a strange echo in a different kind of legend, one that speaks not of sacred fires tended by priests, but of lamps that simply refuse to die. From the crypts of Egypt to the vaults of Roman tombs, stories persist of perpetual lamps, lights that burned for centuries, even millennia, with no one to refuel them. Saint Augustine himself wrote of a temple lamp dedicated to Venus that neither wind nor water could extinguish. These were not fires of ritual, but mysteries of containment, sealed away in darkness with a single, impossible command: burn forever. So what were these legendary devices? Were they divine miracles, clever frauds, or perhaps glimpses of a forgotten science? The most plausible explanations pull us into the world of ancient engineering. Imagine a wick made from an asbestos-like mineral, a substance the Romans called live linen for its fire-resistant properties. Such a wick would not consume itself like cotton or flax, drastically slowing the burning process. Combine that with a reservoir of the purest, slow-burning oil, perhaps refined from white petroleum seepages known to the ancient world, and you might have a lamp that could burn for years, even decades, far beyond the lifespan of its maker. But the legends speak of centuries. This pushes us toward more speculative frontiers. Some researchers have wondered about early electrochemical principles. Could certain ancient metals and electrolytes placed in a damp tomb environment generate a faint galvanic current enough to make a platinum wire glow? It is a tantalizing thought, though no archaeological evidence has ever confirmed such a device. The truth behind these stories is likely a mixture of fact and awe. A lamp found burning in a recently opened, sealed tomb after a mere 100 years would be so shocking as to become legend, its duration exaggerated with each retelling. Yet the persistence of these accounts from so many different cultures suggests a deep, shared fascination. The perpetual lamp was the ultimate symbol of human defiance against entropy, a tiny, self-contained sun placed in the grave, promising that even in death, light could endure. It was a hope made manifest in metal and oil, a hope that some fires once lit were meant to outlast us all. The weight of that duty to keep a flame alive for 1,000 years is almost beyond comprehension. Yet for all their sacred science and vigilance, the Vestals were not infallible. There were moments when the impossible happened, when the sacred fire of Vesta sputtered and died. In the eyes of Rome, this was not an accident. It was a national emergency, a dire omen that the goddess had withdrawn her protection from the city. The response was swift and terrifying. A state of public mourning was declared. The high priest, the Pontifex Maximus, would immediately order a brutal purification ritual. The Vestal Virgin found responsible was stripped of her sacred garments, scourged in a private ceremony, a punishment meant to atone for her failure. But the ritual did not end with her. The entire city had been tainted by the flame's extinction. The fire had to be rekindled, but it could not be done with ordinary means. All fires in Rome, in every home, every temple, every public building, were ceremonially extinguished. The city was plunged into a symbolic darkness, a collective breath held. Then, using the most ancient method known to humanity, priests would focus the rays of the sun with a bronze mirror or lens, catching a new spark from the heavens themselves. This new, pure flame was then carried in a sacred procession to relight the public hearths, beginning with Vesta's temple. The entire process was a profound reset, a reminder that Rome's light came not from man but from the gods. Yet, as centuries passed, the empire itself began to flicker. New beliefs rose, challenging the old gods, and in the year 394, a single decree by the Christian emperor Theodosius I did what no accident or invader ever could. He ordered the eternal flame of Vesta to be extinguished permanently. The Vestal Virgins were disbanded, their temple closed. The hearth at the heart of Rome grew cold. It is a moment of staggering symbolic power. The flame that had burned through the founding of the Republic, the rise of Caesar, and the Pax Romana was snuffed out by imperial command. To many, it was the definitive end of pagan Rome, a clear signal that a new spiritual fire was now ascendant. The fate of the sacred flame and the fate of the Western Empire became eerily intertwined. Just decades later, in 476, the last Roman emperor in the West was deposed. The Eternal City had fallen. Was it mere coincidence, or did the Romans understand a deeper truth? They believed the flame was the soul of the state. When that soul was deliberately put out, perhaps the body of the empire was already living on borrowed time. The sacred fire of Vesta was not just a ritual, it was a covenant. Its final extinction marked the end of an ancient conversation between a people and their gods, a silence that echoed through the crumbling forums and empty temples, a darkness that no ordinary torch could ever lift again. Even as Rome's eternal flame faded into history, another sacred fire was destined for a spectacular rebirth. The modern Olympic torch relay, with its global journey and televised grandeur, feels like a creation of the 20th century. Yet its beating heart is far older, reaching back to the very soil where the ancient games began. At Olympia, long before the first athlete ever sprinted, a different kind of ceremony took place. Here at the altar of Hera, wife of Zeus, priests did not use flint or friction to create fire. They used the sun itself. A polished bronze shield, curved into a parabolic mirror, was angled to capture the sun's intense rays, focusing them onto a single point until a wisp of smoke, then a pure flame, was born from nothing but light. This was no mere practical trick, it was a profound ritual. The fire was considered a direct gift from Apollo, the sun god, and therefore utterly pure and sacred. It burned throughout the ancient Olympic festival, a symbol of the truce between warring city-states, of the striving for physical and spiritual excellence, and of a light shared by all Greeks. This act of creation connected directly to one of their most powerful myths, the story of Prometheus. He was the Titan who defied Zeus by stealing fire from the chariot of the sun, hiding it in a hollow fennel stalk and giving it to humanity. For this act of compassion, Prometheus was punished eternally, chained to a rock where an eagle ate his liver each day, only for it to regrow each night. The myth frames fire as the ultimate divine gift, the spark of civilization, technology, and reason, something so valuable it was worth an eternity of torment to obtain. The priests at Olympia, by using the sun to kindle their flame, were reenacting this primordial theft in a sanctioned, sacred way. They were drawing down the same celestial fire Prometheus stole, but this time with the gods' permission, for the purpose of unity and peace. For over a millennium, this ritual marked the start of every Olympiad. Then, like so much of the ancient world, the games and their sacred flame were extinguished. They slept for 1,500 years. The rekindling in the modern era is a story of deliberate myth-making. For the 1936 Berlin Games, a German classical scholar and sports official named Karl Diem conceived of the torch relay. He envisioned a powerful symbolic link between ancient Greece and the modern German Reich, a narrative of pure Aryan heritage. Runners would carry a flame lit by the sun at Olympia all the way to Berlin. The idea was embraced by the Nazi propaganda machine, which staged the first relay as a spectacular media event. It was a breathtaking, if deeply tainted, resurrection of an ancient symbol. Yet the symbol itself proved more powerful than the ideology that first revived it. The world was captivated by the image of a single flame traveling across borders, passed from hand to hand. After the war, the tradition was purified by its own continuity. The London Games in 1948 saw a new relay, one meant to symbolize recovery and peace. The flame had been reclaimed. Today, the ceremony at Olympia remains almost unchanged from the ancient rite. An actress playing a high priestess still uses a parabolic mirror to light the torch, invoking Apollo and Hera. The flame is still carried by runners, but now it circles the globe, a moving testament to a shared human spirit. It is a perfect modern mystery, a 3,000-year-old ritual born from a myth about a stolen gift, once hijacked for propaganda, now transformed into the most recognizable symbol of international unity on Earth. It proves that some sacred fires never truly die. They only wait for the right moment to be passed once more from the past into an waiting hand. But the Olympic flame was a public spectacle, a fire meant to unite the world in the open air. In stark contrast, another ancient Greek fire burned in utter secrecy, its revelations so profound that to speak of them was a crime punishable by death. This is the enigma of the Eleusinian mysteries. For nearly 2,000 years, from the Bronze Age well into the Roman era, people from all walks of life, slaves, philosophers, and emperors like Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius, made a pilgrimage to the town of Eleusis near Athens. They came for a promise no other religion offered, a direct personal experience of the afterlife, a chance to lose all fear of death. And at the climax of their journey, inside a vast, windowless hall called the Telesterion, they gathered around a great central fire. What transpired in that flickering light remains one of history's most successfully kept secrets. The initiates were sworn to silence under penalty of death, and they kept their vow with astonishing fidelity. We have no clear first-hand account of the central ritual. Instead, we must piece together fragments from ancient writers who hint at what they saw, and from the archaeology of the site itself. The mysteries revolved around the myth of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, and her daughter Persephone, who was abducted by Hades to become queen of the underworld. In her grief, Demeter caused the earth to become barren until a compromise was struck. Persephone would spend part of the year with Hades and part with her mother, explaining the cycle of seasons. The initiates did not just hear this story, they seemed to have experienced it. The multi-day ceremony involved a long procession from Athens to Eleusis, fasting, drinking a special barley potion, and likely enduring moments of disorientation and terror in the darkness. Then they entered the Telesterion. This hall could hold thousands, but it was designed so that only those at the center could see clearly, and at that center was the great fire. Around this fire, priests likely performed a sacred drama, a reenactment of Demeter's search, Persephone's descent, and her joyful return. The fire was not just a light source, it was the focal point of the revelation. Some scholars suggest that at the pivotal moment, perhaps as the story reached its climax with Persephone's return, the fire was suddenly extinguished, plunging the hall into absolute darkness, a symbol of the despair of death. Then, from that void, a single new flame was kindled. This sudden rebirth of light in the total dark, witnessed by thousands who had been emotionally and physically prepared for days, would have been an overwhelming, transformative shock. It was a visceral, undeniable demonstration. From utter darkness comes light, from death comes rebirth. The secret was not a complex doctrine to be memorized, but an experience to be felt in the bones. This is why it could not be spoken of. How do you describe the sun to someone who has lived in a cave? You cannot. You can only lead them outside to see for themselves. The fire at Eleusis was that doorway. It provided the light by which initiates saw the sacred play, and its dramatic death and rebirth provided the ultimate, wordless proof of the mystery's promise. The secret died when a Christianized Rome destroyed the sanctuary in the 4th century, but its power lingers in a simple question. What could be so powerful that it comforted millions for 2 millennia, yet could never be betrayed? The answer may lie not in a hidden truth, but in a shared flame, and the profound human truth it illuminated in the hearts of all who saw it, that even the deepest darkness is not eternal. The profound silence of Eleusis guarded a personal revelation, but another sacred fire was about to make a very public and terrifying statement. In the ancient kingdom of Israel, a single prophet stood alone against hundreds, and the verdict would be delivered in a blaze that consumed stone, water, and doubt. This is the mystery of the flaming chariot of Elijah. To understand his spectacular exit, we must first witness his greatest confrontation. The scene is Mount Carmel. The land is suffering a crippling drought, which the prophet Elijah has declared is a punishment from God because the people are worshipping the Canaanite deity Baal. King Ahab and his queen Jezebel have promoted this worship, filling the land with prophets of Baal. Elijah issues a stunning challenge: let both sides build an altar. Let the prophets of Baal call upon their God, and Elijah will call upon his. The God who answers by sending fire from the sky, he shall be recognized as the true God. The prophets of Baal go first. They pray, they dance, they shout, they even cut themselves with knives in a frenzy of devotion. From morning until evening, there is no voice, no answer, no fire. Then it is Elijah's turn, but he does something extraordinary. He doesn't just build an altar, he rebuilds an old, ruined one with 12 stones, symbolizing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he digs a trench around it. He orders 4 large jars of water to be poured over the sacrifice and the wood. He does this not once, but 3 times until the offering is soaked, the wood is drenched, and the trench is filled with water. This is not just confidence, it is a deliberate amplification of the miracle, removing any possibility of trickery. In the gathering dusk, Elijah offers a simple prayer. Then the fire of God falls. The biblical account describes it consuming not just the sacrifice and the wood, but also the stones of the altar, the dust, and even all the water in the trench. It is an all-consuming, impossible fire, a force that obliterates the natural order to demonstrate a supernatural truth. This fire is not a symbol of warmth or enlightenment. It is pure, undeniable judgment and power. The people fall on their faces, declaring their faith. The event re-establishes the covenant in a single, fiery stroke, but Elijah's work and his danger are not over. Queen Jezebel vows to kill him. He flees into the wilderness, despairing and exhausted. Yet his story does not end in defeat. Years later, as he walks with his successor, Elisha, near the Jordan River, a final, breathtaking mystery unfolds. A chariot of fire and horses of fire suddenly appears, separating the 2 men. Elijah is taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha witnesses it and tears his clothes in grief, but he also picks up Elijah's fallen cloak, inheriting his prophetic authority. The fiery chariot is not a vehicle of destruction this time, but of divine translation. It completes Elijah's legacy, framing him as a figure so pivotal he bypasses death entirely, taken directly into the divine realm by the same elemental force that vindicated him on Carmel. This ascension cemented Elijah's unique place in tradition. He becomes the prophet who will one day return to herald the Messianic age. His story fundamentally shaped the Abrahamic view of fire. Here, fire is the ultimate sign of God's active presence, a tool of judgment against falsehood, a mark of chosen prophets, and a gateway between heaven and earth. It is a far cry from the hearth fire of Vesta or the revelatory flame of Eleusis. This is fire as divine command, a sudden, terrifying, and decisive intervention that changes history in an instant. It asks a haunting question. When the world seems overrun by other voices, what would it take to make you believe in a single, consuming truth? For the ancient Israelites, the answer fell from the sky, leaving nothing but ash and awe in its wake. While Elijah's chariot vanished into the heavens, another monument kept its gaze fixed firmly on the celestial fire, stone by patient stone. On the windswept Salisbury Plain in England, the great circle of Stonehenge stands as a silent witness to a different kind of worship. This was not a temple for a contained, earthly flame, but an immense observatory built for the ultimate fire, the sun itself. The precision of its architecture reveals a civilization obsessed with tracking the sun's journey, marking its most powerful moments with stone. At the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the sun rises directly over the heel stone, its rays shooting through the center of the monument and illuminating the inner altar. This was no accident. It was a deliberate, breathtaking alignment, a moment when the sky's fire and the earth's stone were in perfect conversation. But what was the purpose of this conversation? Archaeologists have uncovered clues that point to a profound and solemn use. Deep pits found around the perimeter, known as the Aubrey holes, contained cremated human remains. This suggests that for centuries, Stonehenge may have been a vast necropolis, a place where the dead were returned to the elements through fire under the watchful eye of the sun. The cycle was symbolic and complete. the life-giving solar fire witnessed the transformative funeral fire, linking death and rebirth in an eternal loop. The monument itself may have functioned as a predictive calendar, a giant stone computer. By tracking the sun's rising and setting points throughout the year, the builders could mark not just solstices, but also the cross-quarter days that signified planting and harvest times. This knowledge was power, the power to predict the seasons, to plan for survival, and to schedule rituals that ensured the sun's return after the dark of winter. Imagine the scene on a misty solstice dawn. A community gathers in the cold, facing the northeast. A priest or chieftain stands at the center, perhaps beside a small, sacred fire kindled at the altar stone. As the first sliver of the sun breaks the horizon, perfectly framed by the great trilithons, its light strikes that central point. At that moment, the celestial fire ignites the earthly one, either literally or symbolically. It is a moment of cosmic validation, a sign that the order of the world holds that the light has triumphed again. Stonehenge, therefore, is a mystery of captured time. Its builders moved stones weighing tons across impossible distances, not to create a shelter, but to create a permanent, unshakable witness to a moving light. They worshipped a fire they could not touch, could not contain, and could never extinguish. They built a cage of stone not to imprison it, but to prove year after year that it would always return. In doing so, they left behind a question etched in sarsen and bluestone. Is a monument that tracks the sun a temple to fire? The answer lies in the alignment. Every stone is a prayer to the light, a permanent altar to the one flame that truly is eternal. The stones of Stonehenge channeled a celestial fire no human could ever hold, but in the ancient Vedic traditions of India, priests sought to do just that, to capture the rhythm of the cosmos in a small clay pot. This is the Agni-Hotra, a fire ritual so precise and so ancient it is considered one of the oldest continuous ceremonies in the world, performed without break for over 3,500 years. Twice a day, as the sun kisses the horizon at dawn and again at dusk, a practitioner prepares for a sacrifice that is measured not in grand scale, but in perfect, meticulous timing. The fire altar is not a massive stone structure, but a small, pyramid-shaped copper or clay pot. Into this vessel goes a specific offering, a spoonful of pure ghee, clarified butter, and a few grains of uncooked rice. The wood is not any fuel. It is from sacred trees like mango or sandalwood, chosen for their clean, fragrant smoke. But the true magic lies in the synchronization. As the exact moment of sunrise or sunset arrives, a mantra from the Rig Veda, the oldest known scripture, is recited. With the final syllable, the offering is dropped into the flames. The entire ritual lasts only a few minutes, yet its purpose is cosmic. It is a daily realignment, a human heartbeat set to the rhythm of the sun. Why such obsessive precision? The Vedic sages saw the universe as an interconnected web of energy. Sunrise and sunset, they believed, were moments of powerful atmospheric transition, when the veil between the material and spiritual worlds was thinnest. By performing the Agni-Hotra at these exact instants, with the specific sound vibrations of the mantras, they aimed to create a resonance. The fire, fed by the ghee, would release a charged smoke that was believed to purify the immediate atmosphere, neutralizing negative energies and promoting a subtle harmony between the individual, the community, and the natural world. Modern practitioners speak of tangible effects, plants growing more vigorously near where the ritual is performed, a palpable sense of peace in the home, even the mitigation of pollution on a micro scale. Scientists have studied the ritual, finding that the burning of ghee and rice at that precise moment can release certain compounds into the air, but the full scope of its claimed benefits remains a beautiful mystery. This is not a spectacle for crowds, it is a private, daily discipline. It represents a profound idea that the sacred is not found in rare, monumental events, but in the consistent, humble repetition of a correct action. The Agnihotra fire is a tiny temporal sun lit and extinguished each day, a reminder that we are not separate from the universe's great cycles but active participants in them. To keep a flame alive for millennia is one thing, but to light it anew twice a day, every day, for over 100 generations is a different kind of eternity, an eternity of attention, a perpetual conversation with the light. The ancient priests at Delphi were masters of atmosphere in every sense, but the source of their most powerful tool may have been a gift from the earth itself, not the gods. For centuries, scholars dismissed the descriptions of intoxicating vapors as myth or metaphor, the imaginative flourishes of superstitious writers. That changed dramatically in the late 1990s when a multidisciplinary team of archaeologists, geologists, and chemists decided to treat the ancient text as a scientific hypothesis. Their investigation led to a stunning geological discovery. Two major fault lines, the Delphic and the Kerner, intersect directly beneath the ruins of the Temple of Apollo. This was not just a crack in the floor, it was a seismic crossroads. Such faults can act as natural conduits, allowing gases deep within the Earth's crust to seep slowly to the surface. The team proposed that the sweet-smelling pneuma, or breath, described by historians like Plutarch, was real, a mixture of hydrocarbon gases rising from a bituminous limestone layer far below. But which gas exactly would have created the Pythia's famous trance? The debate hinges on subtle chemistry and terrifying physiology. One leading candidate is ethylene. This colorless gas has a faintly sweet, almost floral scent matching ancient descriptions. More importantly, in low concentrations, ethylene is a known psychoactive agent. It can induce a detached, dreamlike state, feelings of euphoria, and even out-of-body sensations, all while leaving the subject capable of speaking in fragmented sentences. It fits the profile of a divine frenzy perfectly. The other primary suspect is a more sinister blend, methane and carbon dioxide. These odorless gases could have displaced oxygen in the enclosed, sunken chamber. The Pythia, breathing this depleted air, would have suffered from hypoxia, a state of oxygen starvation. The symptoms: lightheadedness, disorientation, trembling, and slurred speech, a violent physical seizure that could easily be interpreted as possession. So was her prophecy a gentle, ethylene-fueled vision, or a desperate gasp for air in a toxic room? The truth may lie in a horrifying combination. The sacred fire burning in the chamber adds a critical and often overlooked variable. A flame consumes oxygen and produces heat. That heat, rising from the ritual fire, would have created a convection current, actively drawing the lighter than air gases up from the fissure like a chimney. The priests may have controlled the intensity of her trance by adjusting the fire's size, literally turning the divine breath on and off. This leads to the most provocative question of all: did the priests of Apollo know? Were they aware they were building their temple directly over a geological oddity? It seems impossible they were not. The site was chosen long before the classical temple was built, based on older, primal signs. Perhaps a spring that bubbled strangely, or a place where shepherds noticed their animals behaving oddly. The priests would have observed the correlation between the fissure and the Pythia's state over centuries. They perfected the ritual around it. The laurel leaves she chewed may have contained mild stimulants. The fasting made her more susceptible, and the fire managed the dosage. This was not fraud, but a brilliant, empirical application of sacred technology. They had discovered a doorway in the rock, a place where the Earth's own exhalations could alter human consciousness. They interpreted that as the breath of Apollo, and they built an entire institution to harness it safely for what they believed was the benefit of all Greece. The Oracle of Delphi, therefore, stands at a fascinating crossroads. It was both a spiritual sanctuary and the world's first documented use of naturally occurring psychoactive gases in a controlled ritual setting. The mystery is not whether the vapors were real, but what their existence tells us about the ancient mind. To them, there was no conflict between geology and divinity. The trembling of the earth and the trembling of the priestess were one and the same, a sacred fire rising from the depths, giving voice to the unseen. The earth's intoxicating breath gave way to a far more visceral test of faith, one where the divine was proven not by inhaling vapors, but by walking directly into the flames. In the villages of northern Greece and southern Bulgaria, every year in late spring, a centuries-old ceremony unfolds that defies all rational understanding. This is the anastenaria. Devotees, known as anastenarites, gather around a great fire. To the rhythmic, hypnotic beat of large drums and the haunting melody of the lyra, they begin to dance. They are not simply moving to music, they are entering a profound trance state, a communal ecstasy dedicated to Saints Constantine and Helen. Their eyes glaze, their movements become fluid and automatic, their awareness shifts inward. And then, as the fire burns down to a bed of searing, glowing embers, they do the unthinkable. Barefoot and still deep in their altered state, they step onto the coals. They walk, they dance, they shuffle slowly across the red-hot expanse, sometimes for minutes at a time. When they finally step off, their feet are unburned, untouched by the heat that should, by every law of physics, blister flesh in an instant. For the community, this is not a stunt. It is a sacred mystery, a living proof of divine protection and purification. The tradition is believed by scholars to be a remarkable example of religious syncretism, a Christian veneer over a far more ancient pagan core. The dancing ecstasy, the animal sacrifices that sometimes accompany the ritual, and the focus on firewalking itself point directly back to the wild, ecstatic rites of Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, ritual madness, and liberation. When Christianity spread through the region, the old ways did not simply vanish. They transformed, attaching themselves to acceptable Christian saints. Saints Constantine and Helen, a mother and son pair associated with finding the true cross, became the new patrons of this very old fire. So how is such a feat possible? Is it genuine divine intervention, or does it reveal something extraordinary about the human mind and body? The science of fire walking offers fascinating, if incomplete, answers. The key lies in the physics of the embers themselves. Wood coals are not great conductors of heat. They are like little sponges of thermal energy, but they transfer that energy slowly. A quick, light step makes contact for only a second or less, and the ash that coats the coals provides a thin, insulating layer. It is akin to briefly touching a hot cake pan fresh from the oven with a dry fingertip. You can do it without injury if your touch is swift. The anastenarites, through generations of practice, have perfected a specific gait, a light, rolling step that minimizes contact time. But physics alone does not explain the entire mystery. The trance state is the critical psychological component. In this heightened condition of focused devotion and dissociation, walkers experience a dramatic reduction in pain perception and anxiety. The fear response, which could cause someone to panic and press down hard on the coals, is suppressed. Their mind is elsewhere, focused on the saints, the music, the rhythm of the community. This combination, poor conductive material, perfect technique, and an altered state of consciousness creates the conditions for the miracle. For the participants, however, the scientific explanations are irrelevant. The walk is the ultimate act of faith. To emerge unscathed is a sign that the saints are with them, that they are ritually clean, and that their prayers have been heard. It is a physical testament to a spiritual truth, written not on parchment, but on the soles of their feet. The fire does not burn because their faith has, for a moment, rewritten the rules of the world. This ritual asks a profound question of us all. What would you believe if you could walk through fire and come out unharmed? Deep in the foothills of the Himalayas, a temple holds a fire that was never lit by human hands. At the Jaiwala Jai temple in Himachal Pradesh, India, natural flames dance directly from the bare stone floor of a cave-like sanctum. These are not lamps or tended hearths, but jets of blue fire sprouting from cracks in the rock itself, burning day and night without fail. For countless generations, pilgrims have climbed the steep path to this site, believing these flames to be a direct manifestation of the fierce and protective goddess Durga, a divine presence made visible in pure, untamed energy. The temple is built around these fiery vents, and at its heart, 9 distinct flames burn. Each is given a name and worshipped as a separate form of the goddess Jaiwala, the Flaming One, manifesting as Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and others, representing her different powers of destruction, creation, and sustenance. To the faithful, this is not a geological curiosity. It is a living goddess breathing fire from the heart of the mountain. Science, of course, offers a different, yet no less fascinating narrative. The region sits atop significant deposits of natural gas, primarily methane, trapped in the sedimentary rock layers of the Himalayan foothills. Tectonic pressures have created fissures and fractures that act as natural pipelines, allowing this gas to seep slowly to the surface. When it meets the oxygen in the air, a simple spark, perhaps from lightning in the distant past, would have been enough to ignite it. The gas continues to seep, fed by a vast underground reservoir, and so the flames continue to burn. The 9 separate jets simply correspond to different fissures in the temple floor, all tapping into the same subterranean source. It is a perfectly natural phenomenon, one that could theoretically be replicated anywhere with similar gas seeps. Yet here lies the profound mystery of Jaiwala Jai. This is not a clash between science and faith, but a breathtaking harmony. The geological explanation does nothing to diminish the devotion. If anything, it amplifies the awe. The faithful see the mechanism as irrelevant. That the earth itself provides an endless fuel for this divine light is to them further proof of the goddess's immanence. She is in the very stone and gas of the world. The miracle is not that the fire burns without wood, but that it exists here in this specific, sacred configuration of 9 flames, waiting to be discovered and recognized. For centuries, priests have tried to cover the flames with a metal hood, only to find the fire inexplicably emerging from another crack. Attempts to extinguish it with water or other means have always failed. These events are seen as the goddess asserting her will, a playful demonstration that she cannot be contained or explained away. The temple thus becomes a powerful metaphor for how humans encounter the sacred. We find a wonder in the natural world, a perpetual flame, a whispering oracle, a towering stone circle, and our instinct is to build a story around it, to give it a name and a meaning that connects it to our deepest hopes and fears. The gas seep is the canvas, the goddess Durga is the masterpiece painted upon it by centuries of unwavering belief. Pilgrims come not to see a methane leak, but to stand in the presence of the uncreated light, to feel the heat of a power that predates temples and scriptures. It asks a silent question of every visitor. Do you see a combustible hydrocarbon, or do you see a goddess? At Jaiwala Jai, the astonishing answer is that you are looking at both simultaneously, and neither truth cancels the other out. The flame simply burns, a bridge between the deep earth and the human spirit, waiting for you to decide what it means. The goddess's eternal flames burn rooted in stone, but out on the open sea, fire takes on a far more spectral and untethered form. Sailors from the North Atlantic to the South Pacific have returned with chilling tales of ghost ships, their rigging and decks ablaze with a cold, silent light. The most famous is the Flying Dutchman, a phantom vessel doomed to sail the oceans forever. Its appearance a certain omen of catastrophe for any living sailor who glimpses its glowing form. In the Pacific, Polynesian navigators spoke of the Waka Wariwa, or spirit canoes, ghostly fleets lit by a pale fire, seen racing across the waves before a great chief's death. These stories share a haunting detail. The ships are not consumed by normal fire, but are illuminated by a strange, shimmering glow that clings to the masts and spars. This was not mere superstition. It was a desperate attempt to explain a very real and terrifying natural spectacle. The culprit has a name, St. Elmo's fire. During violent thunderstorms at sea, The electrical charge in the air can become so intense that the pointed tips of a ship's masts, yardarms, or even the sailor's own outstretched fingers begin to crackle with a luminous blue or violet plasma. This is not fire in the burning sense, but a continuous electrical discharge, a cousin to lightning, that can hiss and glow for minutes at a time. To a crew already battling a storm, this eerie, dancing light clinging to the ship would have been utterly supernatural. It often appeared at the height of the tempest, when the vessel was in gravest peril, making the association with doom feel terrifyingly logical. The name itself comes from a patron saint of sailors, Saint Erasmus, known as Saint Elmo. Mariners, seeing this unearthly glow, preserved their ship from being struck by a fatal lightning bolt, interpreted it as a sign of his protection, a hopeful omen. Yet the line between protection and haunting was thin. If the light appeared alone on a calm night or took a strange shape, it easily transformed in the telling into a phantom ship, a messenger from the realm of the drowned. These legends served a profound psychological purpose. The ocean was the ultimate unknown, a vast and merciless frontier. By giving a name and a story to its strange phenomena, sailors imposed a kind of order, a narrative on the chaos. A glowing ship might be a terrible omen, but an omen is still a message. It is a sign that the universe is paying attention, that even in the midst of a blind, uncaring storm, there is a pattern, however grim. The flaming ghost ship is therefore a perfect mystery, born at the intersection of atmospheric physics and human dread. It is the moment a natural electrical discharge becomes a character in a story, a warning written in flickering plasma on the dark canvas of the sea. It makes you wonder, in the face of the inexplicable, is a ghost story more comforting than no story at all? The ghostly fires at sea were omens of chaos, but on the misty hills of ancient Britain and Ireland, fire was a force of profound order, tended in the very heart of the home. For the Celtic tribes, the hearth fire was far more than a source of warmth or a cooking tool. It was the living soul of the family, a spiritual anchor that connected the living to their ancestors and the gods. This fire was never allowed to die out completely. Each night, it was carefully banked with ashes to preserve a glowing core, so that each morning the new day's fire could be coaxed from the old. To let the hearth fire go cold was to sever a sacred thread, inviting misfortune and spiritual vulnerability into the home. This domestic flame represented continuity, safety, and the unbroken lineage of the clan. But the Celts also understood fire on a grand cosmic scale, and this was the domain of the Druids. These priestly scholars were the philosophers, judges, and intermediaries between the human and spirit worlds. They did not build temples of stone. Their cathedrals were oak groves, and their altars were great bonfires lit upon sacred hills. During the great seasonal festivals that marked the Celtic wheel of the year, the Druids kindled fires of immense power and purpose. The most famous of these was Beltane, celebrated on the eve of May 1st. This festival marked the beginning of the bright half of the year, a time of fertility, growth, and the return of life. On hilltops across the land, two massive bonfires were built. The entire community would gather, and then, in a powerful act of sympathetic magic, they would drive their cattle between the twin blazes. The thick, fragrant smoke from sacred woods was believed to purify the animals, burning away any sickness or malevolent spirits that might have clung to them during the winter confinement, and ensuring a healthy, productive herd for the coming season. The people themselves would often walk between the fires or leap over smaller flames for the same cleansing blessing. This was fire as a protective filter, a living barrier against the unseen. The Druids also used fire for divination, a practice called sciomancy or shadow reading. By studying the patterns of smoke, the direction of the flames, or the shapes cast by the firelight, they sought to read the will of the gods and foretell events. The crackle of the logs, the color of the embers, even the way the fire consumed its fuel, all were considered a language. At a site like the Hill of Tara, the ancient seat of the High Kings of Ireland, archaeological evidence reveals a landscape meticulously designed for ritual. While the Great Passage tomb of Newgrange is aligned to the winter solstice sunrise, Tara's Rath of the Synods and other earthworks suggest it was a place of assembly and ceremony, where large communal fires would have been central to coronations, treaties, and seasonal rites. The symbolism here is layered and profound. In Celtic cosmology, fire was one of the primary elements alongside earth, air, and water. It represented transformation, will, and the spark of consciousness. A sacred bonfire on a hill was a point of contact, a man-made star on earth that could be seen for miles, uniting the tribe visually and spiritually. It connected the three realms, the underworld through the fuel drawn from the earth, the mortal world in the living community around it, and the upper world through its rising smoke and sparks that seemed to join the stars. So the Celtic relationship with fire was a complete circle. It began in the quiet, constant glow of the family hearth, the microcosm of safety and memory. It expanded to the roaring, public bonfires of the Druids, the macrocosm of purification, prophecy, and communal identity. One was an ember carefully preserved, the other was a blaze deliberately unleashed. Both were considered sacred duties, two sides of the same burning coin, ensuring that the light of the people, both physical and spiritual, would never be extinguished. The hearth fire and the funeral pyre represent two poles of the same sacred element. For the Zoroastrians, whose reverence for fire we have already seen in the Atash Bayram, this duality was a matter of profound spiritual physics. They believed the four sacred elements, earth, water, air, and fire, were creations of the divine and must be kept absolutely pure from contamination, and nothing was considered more contaminating than a dead body. This presented a profound dilemma. How do you respectfully dispose of the dead without polluting the sacred earth, water, or air? Their solution was as stark as it was logical: the Towers of Silence. These were circular, raised stone platforms open to the sky, built on remote hills. The body would be carried in a solemn procession by special corpse bearers and placed within the tower. Then nature would take its course. Vultures would descend, consuming the flesh with astonishing speed. The sun-bleached bones would later be gathered and placed in a central ossuary pit where they would crumble to dust. This practice of sky burial ensured that no earth was tainted by burial, no water was polluted by cremation smoke, and the sacred fire was never defiled by contact with death. Yet fire still had a vital, protective role to play in this process, in a ritual that occurred long before the body reached the tower. This was the Sagdid, the glance of the dog. When a person died, the corpse was considered immediately vulnerable to a demonic force called the Nasu, a corpse demon of putrefaction and corruption. To drive this entity away, a very specific ceremony was performed. A dog, preferably one with a spot above each eye, a four-eyed dog believed to have special sight, was brought into the room where the body lay. The dog was led before the corpse, sometimes 2 or 3 times, to gaze upon it. Zoroastrian texts explain that the sight of this particular animal had the power to frighten away the Nasu. Often, this ritual was performed in the presence of a fire, usually a lamp or a small, contained flame burning in the same room. Why a dog, and what was the fire's purpose? The dog was seen as a creature of moral insight and a guardian against evil. Its gaze was a purifying force, a spiritual disinfectant. The fire's presence amplified this purification. Fire, as the supreme symbol of divine truth and order, created a sacred space, holding the corruption at bay while the dog performed its duty. It was a barrier of light against the darkness of decay. This reveals the incredible nuance in the Zoroastrian relationship with fire. It was not that fire had no connection to death. Rather, its purity was so supreme that it could not be mixed with the impurity of the corpse itself. Fire could be a shield against the pollution of death, but it could never be the means of its disposal. The entire funerary process, from the Sagdid to the final exposure on the tower, was a meticulously choreographed ballet of elements. Each step was designed to neutralize spiritual contamination while honoring the physical body by returning it to the cycle of nature in the cleanest way possible. The fire watched, but it did not touch. It illuminated the path for the soul's journey, but it would not carry the physical remains. In this, we see a philosophy that takes the sacredness of the natural world to its most extreme conclusion, assigning every element a role and protecting the most sacred of all the eternal flame from ever being shadowed by decay. High in the Andes, a different empire built its entire cosmology around a single celestial fire. For the Inca, the sun god Inti was not merely a deity. He was the divine ancestor of the royal family, the source of all life, warmth, and order in a world perched on mountain peaks. His light legitimized the Sopa Inca, the emperor, as a living child of the sun, and his annual return from the farthest point in the sky was a matter of survival. This is why the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year in the southern hemisphere, was marked by Inti Raymi, the most spectacular and politically vital festival in the empire. The ceremony centered on the Coricancha, the temple of the sun in Cusco, whose walls were once sheathed in gold to reflect the god's glory. At the precise moment of the solstice, with the entire imperial court and nobility gathered, the high priest would perform a ritual of fire-making that was both a technological marvel and a sacred act of creation. Using a polished concave mirror made of gold or bronze, he would focus the sun's rays onto a bundle of sacred cotton. A wisp of smoke, then a flame, would spring forth, a new fire born directly from Inti himself. This was no ordinary kindling. This flame was considered the living essence of the sun god captured on earth. The ritual that followed was deeply symbolic. A flawless black llama, an animal sacred to Inti, was sacrificed. Its entrails were read by priests for omens about the coming year, and its body was offered to the flames. But the most powerful act came next. From this primary, God-given fire at the Coricancha, runners with torches would carry the flame to every major temple and administrative center across the empire's vast network of roads. From those provincial centers, it would be carried further to local shrines and finally into the homes of the people. Imagine that chain of light spreading like a pulse from the heart of Cusco, over mountain passes and through valleys, until a version of that same solstice fire burned in the humble hearth of a farmer in distant Chile or Ecuador. This was a stroke of political genius disguised as piety. By distributing the sacred fire, the Inca state physically connected every subject to the central authority of the sun god, and by extension to his son, the Sopa Inca. Your household warmth, the fire you used to cook your food and ward off the night chill, was literally a piece of the state religion. It created a tangible, daily reminder that the empire's power was not just military or economic, but divine and life-giving. The fire in your home was a fragment of the sun given to you by the grace of the emperor. Inti Raymi was therefore far more than a harvest festival or a solstice observance. It was an annual renewal of a sacred contract. The ceremony reaffirmed that the sun would return, that the emperor's right to rule was sanctioned by heaven, and that every citizen, no matter how remote, was a participant in that cosmic order. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived and systematically extinguished these rituals, they understood exactly what they were doing. To crush the Inca spirit, they had to snuff out the sun's fire on earth, breaking that luminous chain that bound an empire together. Yet even today, a revived Inti Raymi is celebrated in Cusco, a testament to the enduring power of a flame that once convinced a continent it was warmed by the hand of a king. The Inca's fire was a chain of command, but a Roman emperor might have held a captured sunset in the palm of his hand. In the British Museum rests a small, astonishing artifact known as the Lycurgus cup. At first glance, it is a beautiful but opaque jade green, but hold it up to the light and a miracle occurs. The entire cup transforms, glowing with a translucent, fiery red, as if a living ember has been trapped inside the glass. This is no ordinary color change. This is a 4th century Roman masterpiece of nanotechnology, a sacred fire frozen in time. The cup is a cage cup or diatritum, meaning the elaborate decorative scene depicting the mythical king Lycurgus being ensnared by vines for his defiance of the god Dionysus, was carved from a single thick block of glass, leaving the figures standing out in high relief against a delicate latticed cage. The technical skill required for this alone is staggering, but the true magic is in the glass itself. Roman artisans, through a process they almost certainly did not fully understand, had stumbled upon one of the ancient world's most precise chemical recipes. They were making colloidal gold. Scientific analysis reveals that the glass contains minute particles of gold and silver, each measuring only about 50 nanometers across. That is about 1,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair. These nanoparticles are not simply mixed in, they are suspended in a specific, perfect dispersion within the glass matrix. How they achieved this without modern instruments is a profound mystery. The leading theory suggests they began by creating a batch of glass infused with tiny amounts of gold and silver salts. Then, through a meticulous process of repeated heating, cooling, and reheating, a kind of ancient annealing, they caused the metals to precipitate out of the solution, forming these incredibly fine, uniform particles. The result is a phenomenon called dichroism. Light behaves differently depending on how it hits these nanoparticles. In reflected light, the glass scatters the shorter blue and green wavelengths, giving the cup its jade hue. But when a light source is placed behind it, shining through the glass, the particles absorb the blue-green light and allow the longer red wavelengths to pass straight through, creating that spectacular blood-red glow. To a Roman viewer, this would have seemed nothing short of alchemy, a divine trick. Imagine this cup at an imperial banquet. In the ambient torchlight of the room, it would sit on the table, a cool green vessel. Then a servant places a single candle or small oil lamp behind it. Suddenly, the scene of Lycurgus's torment ignites from within, the figures silhouetted against a hellish, ruby light, as if the myth itself were burning. Such a dramatic transformation strongly suggests a ritual purpose, perhaps in the worship of Dionysus or Bacchus, gods of wine, ecstasy, and transformation. The cup itself becomes a participant in the ceremony, its changing colors mirroring the transformative power of the god and the wine it likely held. It is a perfect union of art, accident, and devotion. The artisans were not trying to invent nanotechnology. They were chasing a specific magical effect, a permanent sacred flame that required no fuel and never died. In doing so, they created an object that bridges our world and theirs. We look at it and see a stunning confirmation of advanced materials science, a lucky accident of ancient chemistry. They looked at it and saw a god's wrath made tangible, a fire that could be poured from a pitcher, a miracle held in the hand. The Lycurgus cup asks a silent question of every age. When you witness a wonder, do you see the mechanism or the magic? For one breathtaking moment in history, they were exactly the same thing. The Lycurgus cup held its captive fire for a single emperor's table, but a far more widespread Roman mystery burned in spaces designed to feel like the very bowels of the earth. In the forgotten cellars beneath bustling city streets and frontier forts, the cult of Mithras gathered. This was not a religion for the public square, but for the initiated brotherhood, overwhelmingly soldiers, merchants, and imperial officials who craved a personal path to salvation and strength. Their temples, called Mithraea, were deliberately subterranean, long, narrow, barrel-vaulted chambers meant to mimic the cave where, according to their myth, the god Mithras captured and sacrificed the primordial bull. And in that symbolic cave, fire and light were not just props, they were the very mechanics of spiritual ascent. Walking into a Mithraeum was an act of descent into a controlled darkness. The only illumination came from flickering lamps and torches, their light casting dramatic shadows on the central cult image that dominated every temple, the Tauroctony. This scene showed Mithras in his distinctive Phrygian cap kneeling on the back of a bull, plunging a dagger into its shoulder, but this was not mere slaughter. From the dying animal's wound sprang wheat, and from its tail, vines. From its blood, life itself flowed. This was a sacrifice that sustained the cosmos, a secret too potent for the daylight world. The initiates believed that by ritually reenacting elements of this myth, they could align their own struggles with this cosmic victory. Their journey was mapped out in a rigid hierarchy of 7 grades, each with its own planetary association and ordeal. Fire and light were the tools of this transformation. For an initiate moving from the grade of Miles, the soldier, to that of Leo, the lion, the ritual was particularly intense. The grade of Leo was associated with the element of fire itself. Historical clues and the layout of the temples suggest that initiates might have been subjected to rituals involving heat, smoke, or the symbolic threat of burning. Some Mithria have channels or pits that could have held actual flames, over which an initiate may have been passed or near which he had to stand. The goal was purification by the sacred element, a trial by symbolic fire that burned away the old mortal self. The architecture itself orchestrated a drama of light. Many Mithria had a small, high window or a light shaft strategically placed so that on the summer solstice, a beam of sunlight would pierce the darkness and strike a specific point on the altar or the cult relief. For a brief moment, the sun god Sol, who was Mithras' companion in the myth, would literally enter the cave, validating the mysteries performed there. This was the ultimate sacred fire, a celestial one, invited into the heart of the underground ritual. The flickering torchlight of the ceremonies was a humble echo of this divine visitation, training the initiate to see the cosmic in the confined. What survives in these silent stone chambers tells a story of desperate seeking. In a vast, impersonal empire, these men created a portable brotherhood. Every frontier fort, from northern Britain to the Syrian desert, often had its own Mithrium. The rituals, the shared meal of bread and wine that commemorated the bull's life-giving body, the progression through the fiery grades, all offered a promise of order, merit, and personal triumph in a chaotic world. The soldier's physical endurance found a spiritual mirror in the trials of the cave. His loyalty to his unit was echoed in the secret handshakes and coded language of the cult. When Christianity finally rose and systematically dismantled these rival mysteries, the Mithria were sealed or converted, their altars broken. But the stones still whisper of a time when a man's worth was tested not just on the battlefield, but in a dark room facing a carved god and the transformative promise of a carefully controlled flame. While the Mithria held their sacred fire in man-made caves, a far more elusive flame danced freely in nature's own shadowy places. Across the foggy moors and stagnant marshes of the world, travelers have long reported strange, flickering lights. They appear as pale blue or greenish globes, hovering just above the ground, moving with an eerie, intelligent motion before vanishing into the mist. In Britain, they were called Will-O, the wisps or jack-o'-lanterns, said to be the spirits of wicked men condemned to wander the earth with a burning coal. In Japan, they were the Hitodama, floating balls of fire that were the separated souls of the recently deceased. Almost universally, these lights were seen as malicious, luring the weary and the lost off safe paths into treacherous bogs where they would drown. The folklore is a masterpiece of atmospheric horror, a perfect explanation for a terrifying, recurrent phenomenon. But what is actually happening in those damp, dark places? The answer lies in a slow, cold chemistry of decay. In waterlogged environments like marshes, peat bogs, and swamps, organic matter dead plants, animals decomposes without much oxygen. This anaerobic decomposition produces gases, primarily methane, also known as swamp gas. As these bubbles of methane rise through the water and mud, they can bring with them trace amounts of another gas, phosphine or diphosphane. When this gaseous mixture meets the oxygen-rich air at the surface, it can ignite spontaneously. The combustion is brief and cool, creating that characteristic ghostly glow without significant heat. It flickers because the gas is released in pockets, and it moves because the ignition point travels with the rising bubble. This is the scientific heart of the mystery, a natural chemical lantern. Yet, knowing the chemistry does nothing to dispel the power of the stories. The human mind, faced with a light that moves with apparent purpose in a landscape of pure danger, cannot accept it as random. It must be a guide, and given the lethal environment, it must be a deceitful one. The British tale of Jack O'Lantern is particularly vivid. It tells of a sly blacksmith named Jack who tricks the devil and is denied entry to both heaven and hell upon his death. The devil, in a final mockery, gives him a single burning coal to light his way through eternal darkness. Jack places it in a hollowed-out turnip, becoming a doomed wanderer who uses his false light to lead others astray. This story provided a name, a face, and a motive for the inexplicable glow. In Japan, the Hitodama is less intentionally evil but equally haunting. It is often depicted as a floating fireball with a trailing, wispy tail, the color of a ghostly flame. The belief held that for a short time after death, a person's soul or spirit could separate from the body and become visible as this drifting light before moving on to the afterlife. To see one was therefore an omen, a direct encounter with the recently departed. This transformation of a gas leak into a soul is a profound leap of meaning. It shows how our ancestors populated the unknown with narratives that explained not just the world, but the human condition. Our fear of the dark, our anxiety about death, and our deep-seated suspicion that nature is not indifferent but actively cunning. The will-o'-the-wisp did not just lead people into bogs. It gave form to the idea that temptation often wears the guise of a guiding light. So the next time you hear a tale of a phantom lantern in the marsh, remember you are hearing two truths layered perfectly atop one another. The first is a simple reaction of methane and phosphine. The second, and far older, is the story we tell ourselves when we are alone in the dark and a light appears where no light should be. The ghost lights of the marsh were deceptive, but in the heart of ancient Jerusalem, a flame was meant to burn with absolute, unwavering truth. Within the Second Temple's inner sanctum stood the menorah, a magnificent seven-branched lampstand of solid gold. Its design was divinely prescribed and its purpose was non-negotiable. Its lamps were to burn continuously, fueled only by the purest, specially prepared olive oil. This was the Ner Tamid, the eternal light, a visible symbol of God's unending presence and watchfulness over the people of Israel. The oil itself was a product of sacred labor. It could not come from just any olive press. The olives had to be hand-picked, not beaten from the tree, and only the very first drop of oil from each olive, obtained through a gentle, cold pressing, was considered pure enough for this holiest of purposes. This meticulous process ensured that the flame was fed by the essence of the fruit, unsullied by force or impurity. The fire of the menorah was therefore a covenant in light, a daily demonstration of a relationship maintained through perfect obedience and perfect offering. But history delivered a crisis that would transform this ritual flame into a legend of miraculous survival. In the 2nd century before the Common Era, the Jewish people revolted against the oppressive Seleucid Empire which had desecrated the temple. After a hard-fought victory, the Maccabee brothers and their followers reclaimed Jerusalem. Their first task was to rededicate the defiled temple, a process called Hanukkah, which means dedication. A central part of this was relighting the menorah. The problem was the oil. According to the Talmudic tradition, they searched the temple grounds and found only a single, small cruse of the ritually pure olive oil, still sealed with the imprint of the high priest. It contained enough oil to keep the menorah lit for just one day. Preparing a new batch of this sacred oil would take 8 days. Faced with this impossible choice, they lit the menorah anyway. And then the miracle unfolded. That tiny portion of oil, enough for a single day, continued to burn. It burned for a second day and a third until it had provided light for a full 8 days, just enough time to produce a new supply of pure oil. This was not a fire of conquest or judgment, but a fire of perseverance and divine grace. It was a quiet, sustaining miracle, one that said the light of faith could endure even when logic and resources said it should fail. The 8-branched Hanukkah menorah, or Hanukkah, commemorates this event with its central shamash or servant candle used to light the others over 8 nights. But the deeper symbol goes back to that original 7-branched flame in the temple. The Ner Tamid was never about providing practical illumination. The temple had windows for that. It was about making the invisible visible. The miracle of Hanukkah amplified that idea exponentially. It declared that the divine presence was not limited by the physical supply of oil, that the covenant could not be extinguished by political tyranny or material shortage. The flame that burned for 8 days on 1 day's fuel became the ultimate metaphor for hope in the face of impossible odds. It asks a quiet, powerful question that resonates far beyond any single tradition. When you are down to your last measure of fuel, your last bit of strength, what makes you light the lamp anyway? For the Maccabees, the answer was faith in a promise older than empires, a promise that some fires, once kindled in truth, are granted a sustenance all their own. A barrier of fire stands between humanity and its oldest dream. After the exile from Eden, the biblical narrative describes a final, breathtaking safeguard. Cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way were placed to guard the way to the tree of life. This is not a weapon meant for battle, but a metaphysical seal. The image is stark and unforgettable. A whirling, omnidirectional blade of pure fire, operated by celestial beings, ensuring that mortals cannot return to eat from the tree and live forever. Its purpose is profoundly clear: to make immortality inaccessible. But why a flaming sword, and why one that turns every way? The fire here is divine energy in its most active, judicial form. It is not a warming hearth or a guiding beacon. It is a consuming, impassable boundary. The turning motion signifies its perfection. There is no angle of approach, no moment of inattention, no clever path around it. The protection is total. The message is that some realms, once lost, cannot be regained by human effort. The flaming sword transforms the garden from a lost home into a sacred, forbidden precinct, guarded by the very essence of God's holiness, which burns away all that is unworthy to approach. For theologians and mystics, this symbol has spawned endless layers of meaning. Some see it as an allegory for the conscience, the internal fire of moral knowledge that makes a naive return to innocence impossible. Others interpret it as the law itself, a fiery divine standard that defines the boundary between the profane and the holy. In more esoteric traditions, the sword is the rotating wheel of cosmic law or karma, the active principle of justice that maintains separation until a higher reconciliation is achieved. The cherubim, often depicted as composite creatures with multiple faces, symbolize the fullness of divine wisdom overseeing this barrier. Together, they represent a formidable truth. The path back to the source of life is not blocked by a wall, but by intelligent, dynamic, and utterly pure fire. This shifts our understanding of sacred fire once more. Here, fire is the ultimate custodian. It does not invite, it does not reveal, and it does not transform the seeker. It simply and irrevocably says no. It protects the sanctity of immortality from being seized by those not ready for its burden. In this single, potent image, fire is both the guardian of divine mystery and the stark proof of our exile from it. The flaming sword does not merely block a physical path. It illuminates the unbridgeable gap between the mortal and the eternal, a gap that can only be crossed by a means humanity could not provide for itself. The flaming sword guarded paradise from humanity, but for the Aztecs, the sun itself hung in a precarious balance, requiring a far more terrible offering. Their universe operated on a fragile 52-year calendar cycle known as the Zumulpili, the binding of the years. As this cycle drew to a close, a profound terror gripped the empire. The movement of the stars and the sun was not guaranteed. The gods, weary or displeased, might simply allow the current cosmic age to end, plunging the world into eternal, motionless darkness. To prevent this, they performed the most high-stakes ritual of renewal in the ancient world, the new fire ceremony. In the final days of the cycle, a solemn stillness fell. Every single fire in the Aztec realm, in temples, palaces, and the humblest homes was deliberately extinguished. Pottery was smashed, household altars were cleared. The empire willingly plunged itself into a symbolic void, a collective act of faith that the darkness would only be temporary. This was a total reset, a wiping clean of the cosmic slate. All eyes then turned to the Hill of the Star, a mountain overlooking the capital of Tenochtitlan. There, under a sky dense with stars, the empire's fate would be decided. At midnight, priests carefully watched the heavens for a specific sign. The star cluster we call the Pleiades, passing directly through the zenith, the highest point in the sky. This celestial alignment was the signal that the universe was still in motion, that the gods permitted the attempt at renewal. The tension in that moment is almost unimaginable. If the stars failed to align correctly, it was believed the sun would not return, and monstrous Tzimime star demons would descend to devour the last of humanity. But if the sign was good, the ritual proceeded with terrifying speed. A captive warrior, chosen for his valor and thus a worthy offering, was laid upon a stone slab. A priest using a ceremonial fire drill would not attempt to create a spark on wood. Instead, he would place the drill directly on the victim's chest. As the drill was spun, it was not just friction, but the very life force of the sacrifice that was called upon. If the gods accepted the offering, a new fire would miraculously kindle in the victim's open chest cavity. This was the ultimate sacred fire, a flame born from a human heart, fueled by the energy of a life given to compel the sun to live another 52 years. Priests would then transfer this primal, life-born flame to a massive ceremonial brazier. From that single source, runners with torches would carry the fire down the mountain in a spectacular cascade of light. Messengers in swift canoes would race across Lake Texcoco to the mainland, where other runners waited to carry the flame along the empire's roads to every city, town, and village. In each community, people watched the horizon for the glow of the approaching torch. When it arrived, they would pierce their ears and tongues, offering their own blood in thanks, and then take the new fire to relight their hearts. The entire civilization, from emperor to farmer, was literally reignited from a single spark taken from a sacrificial pyre. This was not mere ritual, it was a profound cosmological contract. The Aztecs believed the sun god Huitzilopochtli required constant nourishment, the sacred energy of Teotl, which was most potent in human blood and the still beating heart. The new fire ceremony was the ultimate payment on that debt, a massive infusion of life energy to recharge a dying sun. The fire in the chest was the transaction made visible. To see your hearth lit from that flame was to know you had personally contributed to and benefited from this cosmic bargain. Your family's warmth, your cooked food, your safety from the dark, all were purchased by that sacrifice on the mountain. It framed existence itself as a precarious gift, one that required the most extreme devotion to maintain. The ceremony bound the people to the state and the state to the cosmos in a cycle of terrifying reciprocity. Why would a civilization commit to such a grim ritual? Because it worked. For them, the proof was undeniable. Every 52 years they performed the ceremony, and every time without fail the sun rose the next morning. The ritual confirmed their view of the universe as a place of beautiful, brutal balance, where light was not free but earned through the ultimate currency. It asks us a haunting question about the nature of gratitude. We take the sunrise for granted. The Aztecs did not. They lived with the visceral understanding that the world's continuance required a price, and they were willing as a society to pay it. Their sacred fire was not just a symbol of renewal, but the receipt for a debt settled, the proof that for another generation the darkness had been held at bay. The Aztecs' fire was born from a human heart to compel the sun, but the Byzantine Empire possessed a weaponized fire that seemed to have a mind of its own. For over 700 years, the secret known as Greek fire was the ultimate guardian of Constantinople, a liquid nightmare that could not be extinguished by water and in fact burned even more fiercely upon it. Imagine the terror of an enemy sailor seeing a stream of liquid fire arch from a Byzantine warship, hitting the sea with a hiss before erupting into a clinging, inescapable inferno that raced across the waves to consume their wooden hull. This was not mere incendiary warfare. It was a form of alchemical terror that defied the natural order, and its exact recipe died with the empire that perfected it. The secret was so closely guarded that only a handful of people, the emperor and a single family of chemists, are said to have known the full formula. Revealing it was treason punishable by death. This obsessive secrecy is why, despite centuries of analysis, Greek fire remains one of history's greatest military mysteries. So what do we know? Contemporary descriptions and later experiments point to a petroleum-based concoction. The Byzantines had access to crude oil seepages around the Black Sea, which they called naphtha. This thick, flammable liquid was likely the base, but plain oil floats and burns on water. Greek fire was described as being projected in a liquid stream and as burning with such intensity that it could only be put out by sand, strong vinegar, or old urine, which suggests a chemical reaction beyond simple combustion. The most compelling theories involve additives that made the mixture both sticky and self-igniting. Quicklime, for instance, heats up violently when it contacts water. A mixture of naphtha and quicklime kept separate in a sealed container would ignite spontaneously when sprayed onto the sea, creating that horrifying, sudden blaze. Other researchers point to saltpeter, a key ingredient in later gunpowder, which could have provided an oxidizer, allowing the fire to burn even underwater. The delivery system was as ingenious as the fuel. Byzantine drummen warships were outfitted with bronze tubes or siphons mounted on their prows. These were not simple sprayers, they were likely early pressurized nozzles. Using a pump mechanism and a brazier to preheat the mixture, operators could project a continuous jet of liquid fire over a surprising distance, like a primitive ship-mounted flamethrower. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical damage. For centuries, this weapon secured the survival of the Eastern Roman Empire against overwhelming odds. It shattered Arab fleets besieging Constantinople in the 7th and 8th centuries, saving Christian Europe from a potential early conquest. It was the technological shield that allowed Byzantine culture, law, and knowledge to persist through the Dark Ages. Yet its very success contained the seeds of its loss. Because the secret was so compartmentalized, a single crisis, a palace coup, the death of a master chemist, the sack of a key workshop, could break the chain of knowledge forever. That is precisely what happened. As the empire dwindled, the secret was lost sometime around the 13th century. Later emperors tried to recreate it, but the magic was gone. The formula vanished, leaving behind only awe-struck descriptions and a legacy of fear. Greek fire stands as a powerful paradox. It was a sacred flame in the most pragmatic sense, a holy fire that protected the god-guarded city of Constantinople, a technological sacrament known only to a priestly class of engineers. Its loss reminds us that some knowledge is so potent, so tied to a specific time and place, that it can simply evaporate from history, leaving us to wonder at the glowing, terrifying shadow it once cast upon the water. The secret of Greek fire was a state secret guarded on pain of death, but the dream of a self-sustaining flame was also pursued in the shadows by those who sought not to burn ships but to illuminate eternity. This brings us back to those legendary perpetual lamps and the minds who claimed to know their secret, the alchemists. In the dusty manuscripts of medieval and Renaissance Europe, Nestled between recipes for turning lead into gold and creating the elixir of life, you can find instructions for crafting lamps that never go out. These were not attributed to engineers, but to the mythical sage Hermes Trismegistus, a fusion of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. He was the father of Hermetic philosophy, and his supposed knowledge encompassed the divine structure of the cosmos. So why would such a lofty figure concern himself with a lamp? For the alchemist, the answer was obvious. The perpetual lamp was not a mere gadget, it was the ultimate symbol of their entire quest. It represented the philosopher's stone, the elixir vitae, and the immortal spirit itself, a light that could not be quenched by time or corruption. The recipes for these lamps are cryptic and wondrous. One text might call for the oil of a special serpent or the fat of a white stag. Another describes a wick made from asbestos, fed by an oil that miraculously replenishes itself from the air. Some instructions point to materials we can recognize today as naturally phosphorescent, like certain barium compounds or fireflies, which could give the illusion of a cold, enduring glow. The most intriguing recipes involve creating a sealed vessel, a self-contained universe. One might combine pure gold, a metal the alchemists associated with the sun and perfection, with a special salt and a distillate of wine, sealing it hermetically. The idea was to create a perpetual motion of subtle vapors inside the glass, a microcosmic cycle that would fuel a tiny, eternal flame. Were these meant to be built, or were they elaborate allegories? The line was intentionally blurred. When an alchemist wrote of a lamp fed by the blood of the green lion, a fellow initiate would understand this as a coded reference to a chemical process, perhaps involving a green vitriol solution. The inextinguishable light was the enlightened soul, the inner fire of wisdom that, once awakened through spiritual and laboratory work, would burn forever. To build the physical lamp was to enact the spiritual transformation. Success in one proved progress in the other. So did any alchemist ever succeed in lighting a literal 1,000-year flame? We have no solid evidence, but their pursuit reveals a profound truth about the human relationship with fire. The perpetual lamp was the perfect alchemical goal because it married the material and the spiritual into a single, tangible object. It was a prayer made of glass and metal, a test of one's mastery over nature and oneself. To create a fire that defied entropy was to touch the divine principle of creation, to become a co-sustainer of light in a universe sliding toward darkness. Their failed experiments and cryptic texts leave us with a haunting question. In seeking a lamp that never dies, were they chasing a physical miracle, or were they building a metaphor so powerful it continues to illuminate our fascination with eternal light to this day? These twin festivals framed the Celtic year not as a line but as a circle of fire. While we have touched on the purification of Beltane, its true power is only understood when held in balance with its dark counterpart, Samhain. Celebrated on the eve of November 1st, Samhain marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of the cold, dark half of the year, but it was far more than a seasonal shift. The Celts believed that on this night, the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead, the Shia, grew thin and porous. Spirits, both ancestral and mischievous, could cross over. The great communal bonfires lit on Samhain were not primarily for celebration, but for protection and guidance. They were beacons in a suddenly haunted darkness, serving two vital purposes. First, they offered warmth and light to welcome the benevolent spirits of family ancestors, inviting them to briefly rejoin the hearth. Second, and just as crucially, their flames were thought to ward off and frighten away any malevolent entities that might slip through the thinning veil. Every home hearth in the community would be extinguished. Then, from the sacred central bonfire, kindled by the Druids through friction of sacred oak, new fire would be taken in torches to relight each home. This act physically connected every family to the communal protection, weaving a web of holy fire across the landscape. Now, place Samhain directly opposite Beltane on the wheel of the year. Beltane on May 1st celebrated the sun's peak, the explosion of life, fertility, and the beginning of the bright half. Its fires were about encouragement, blessing, and activation. The ritual of driving cattle between two great bonfires was a literal passage through a tunnel of sacred power, designed to cleanse the animals of winter lethargy and bless them with health and fertility for the grazing season ahead. Young couples would leap over the Beltane flames for the same blessing, their jump a symbolic act to promote personal fertility and prosperity. The smoke itself was considered a carrier of these blessings. People would run through it or wave cloth through it to capture its sanctity, bringing that charged air home. So here we have the complete cycle. Samhain's fire was a shield, a defensive barrier against the unseen as life retreated into the earth. Beltane's fire was a spark, an offensive catalyst to propel life back out into the world. Both rituals involved a dangerous, purifying passage for the Samhain spirits crossing the veil, and for the Beltane livestock and people jumping the flames. Both required the communal fire to relight the domestic hearth, binding the fate of the individual to the fate of the tribe. These were not simple harvest festivals. They were sophisticated spiritual technologies for managing the invisible forces of life and death, growth and decay. The bonfire was the tool. By gathering around it, the community collectively affirmed the order of the cosmos. They acknowledged the dead at Samhain without being claimed by them, and they encouraged life at Beltane without being overwhelmed by its chaos. The fire was the stable point around which these terrifying and wonderful transitions could safely turn. When you light a jack-o'-lantern on Halloween, you are, in a deeply diluted way, participating in this ancient logic. You are placing a carved, protective light in the darkness to ward off spirits, a tiny, personal echo of those great Samhain beacons that once told the unseen world, you may pass by, but you may not cross this line of light. High on a remote mountain in northern Iraq, a different kind of eternal flame flickers within the ancient sanctuary of Lalish. This is the sacred fire of the Yazidis, a people whose faith is among the oldest on earth and whose story is one of breathtaking beauty and profound suffering. Their central figure is Melek Taus, the peacock angel, often misunderstood by outsiders. He is not a fallen angel, but a beloved emanation of the one God, entrusted with the care of the world. His symbol, the peacock, represents the dazzling spectrum of light refracted from the divine source, a promise that beauty and color will always emerge from unity. And at the physical heart of this faith, in the inner sanctum of the Lalish temple complex, a simple oil lamp burns without cease. This is the Kyra, the eternal flame. It is not merely a ritual object, it is the living core of Yazidi identity, a tiny, defiant sun in a long history of darkness. The flame's symbolism is direct and powerful. It is the light of divine wisdom, the presence of Melek Taus, and the eternal truth that illumination will always triumph over oblivion. To understand the weight this small flame carries, you must know the shadow it has burned against. For centuries, the Yazidis, with their unique beliefs, have faced relentless persecution, branded as devil worshippers by those who did not understand their veneration of the peacock angel. They have endured dozens of genocidal campaigns known as famines, each aimed at extinguishing them. The most recent, in 2014, saw the so-called Islamic State sweep into their homeland, committing atrocities intended to erase the Yazidi people from the earth. Through it all, the guardians of Lalish performed a sacred duty. As ISIS advanced, the last caretakers of the temple made an impossible decision. They could not take the physical flame, but they could preserve its essence. In a profound act of faith, they extinguished the eternal lamp, collected its sacred oil, and smuggled it out of the war zone, hiding it to keep it pure. For the first time in perhaps 7 centuries, the sanctuary was dark. The flame that had witnessed countless prayers, births, and sorrows was gone, not by accident, but by loving, protective hands. Then, a miracle of resilience. When the Yazidi homeland was liberated, the faithful returned to Lalish. They brought forth the hidden oil. in a ceremony charged with emotion, they rekindled the lamp. The eternal flame was reborn from its own preserved essence. This act is the ultimate testament to the Yazidi spirit. The fire had not died, it had only been waiting. It now burns again, not just as a symbol, but as a living memory. It is a quiet, continuous rebuttal to every attempt at annihilation. Every drop of oil that feeds it carries the story of survival. Every flicker of light pushes back against the historical darkness meant to consume this people. The flame in Lalish, therefore, is more than a religious symbol. It is a covenant written in fire. It says that a people can be scattered, attacked, and driven to the brink, but the core of their identity, like a carefully guarded spark, can endure. It proves that eternity is not about an unbroken line of light, but about the unwavering will to relight it, no matter how deep the night has been. In a world of fleeting trends, this flame asks a question of timeless gravity. What is the one light you would protect, even if you had to hide it in the dark to save it? The Yazidi flame is a testament to survival, but another ancient fire casts a far more troubling shadow. In the ruins of Carthage on the coast of North Africa lies a sacred precinct known as the Tophet. Here, archaeologists have unearthed a haunting collection, thousands of small stone urns, each containing the charred bones of infants, lambs, and young birds. These remains were not simply buried, they were cremated, reduced to ash and fragment by a sacred fire. The ritual purpose of this place is one of history's most chilling and hotly debated mysteries. For centuries, classical Roman and Greek writers accused the Carthaginians of a horrific practice, the regular sacrifice of their firstborn children to the gods Baal, Hammon, and Tanit, especially in times of crisis like war, famine, or plague. They described a bronze statue of the god with outstretched, sloping arms, onto which the child was placed before rolling into a pit of fire. Modern scholars have long wrestled with these accounts, questioning if they were mere wartime propaganda, a smear campaign by Rome against its greatest rival. But the physical evidence from the Tophet is undeniable and deeply unsettling. The urns are not found in random locations. They are meticulously stacked in layers within a clearly demarcated sacred space, often marked with stone markers called stelae. These stones are inscribed with symbols of the gods and a simple, repetitive dedication. To the Lady Tanit and to Baal Hammon, that which was vowed. The contents are consistent, the cremated remains of the very young. Statistical analysis of the bones reveals a startling pattern. The vast majority are from infants under the age of 2, with a significant spike in perinatal deaths, children who died around the time of birth. This is the crux of the modern debate. One school of thought argues these were simply the cremated remains of children who died naturally. In an era of high infant mortality, a special cemetery for the young is not, in itself, proof of sacrifice. The animal bones mixed in could represent more traditional offerings, yet other evidence is harder to explain away. Some urns contain the bones of a single animal. Others contain the bones of both an animal and a child, and a distinct few contain only the bones of a child. This suggests a substitution ritual offering an animal in place of a child, which implies that the child's offering was the original intended act. The grim religious logic, if the ancient accounts are true, was one of ultimate reciprocity. In the Carthaginian worldview, the gods controlled fate, fertility, and victory. A crisis was a sign the gods were displeased or required a greater payment. What could be more valuable, a more potent conduit of life force than a firstborn child? By offering their most precious possession through the transformative medium of fire, parents and rulers believed they were settling a cosmic debt, buying the survival of the family or the state with the ultimate currency. The fire itself was not an agent of torture, but of swift, total consecration. It instantly transmuted the physical body into smoke and ash, a pure offering sent directly to the divine realm. To withhold such an offering, they may have believed, would bring far greater catastrophe upon the entire community. The Tophet's fires, therefore, present us with an almost unbearable paradox. They represent a parent's deepest love twisted by a terrifying theology into its most horrific expression. Was this a culture of profound, sanctioned brutality, or are we misreading a poignant cemetery through the biased lens of its enemies? The urns sit silently in museums, their tiny contents speaking a language we are still struggling to translate. They force us to confront the darkest potential of sacred fire, not as a giver of life or light, but as the final, accepting witness to a promise no parent should ever have to keep. The hearth fire of Hestia burned with a quiet constancy that held entire worlds together. While grand temples celebrated gods of war and wisdom, the most sacred flame in ancient Greece was found not in a marble sanctuary, but in the simple, circular hearth at the center of every home. This was the domain of Hestia, the firstborn of the Olympians, a goddess so fundamental she rarely appears in dramatic myths. Her power was in her presence, in the fire that was never allowed to go out. The ritual was clear. The first offering of every meal, a libation of wine or a bit of food, was poured into her flames before any other god was honored. Her fire was the family's soul, its source of warmth, cooked food, and light against the night. To tend it was a sacred duty, and to share its warmth was the ultimate act of hospitality, a bond protected by Zeus himself. This concept of the sacred center scaled perfectly from the home to the city-state. Every Greek city had its own public hearth, the Prytaneon, housing Hestia's communal fire. This flame was the symbolic heart of the polis, and its perpetual maintenance was a state responsibility. Magistrates dined near it, honored guests were welcomed there, and its continuity represented the political stability and life of the city itself. But the true test of this bond came with one of the most daring and traumatic acts in the ancient Greek world, founding a new colony. When overpopulation or strife forced a city to send out a band of its citizens to establish a new settlement across the sea, they were not just leaving home, they were recreating it. And they could not do so from scratch. As the colonists prepared to depart, a solemn ceremony took place at the city's Prytaneon. A flame was taken directly from Hestia's public hearth and carried onto the lead ship, kept alive in a special clay or bronze brazier for the entire perilous journey. Think of that voyage, weeks on the open sea, battling storms and uncertainty, with the most precious cargo being not gold or weapons, but a single sheltered flame. Upon reaching the chosen shore, the first act of foundation was not to build a wall or a temple, but to use that transported fire to kindle the new city's own public hearth. Only then, with the mother fire burning on foreign soil, was the colony considered truly established. This was not a sentimental tradition, it was a metaphysical lifeline. The new city was not a separate entity, but a living extension of the old, connected by an unbroken chain of fire and ash. The bond was permanent and carried obligations. The colony owed the mother city religious deference and loyalty, much like a child honors a parent. They shared not just a flame, but a sacred ancestry. This ritual transformed the anxiety of exile into a story of organic growth. The colonists were not castaways, they were a branch carrying the living heart of their homeland with them to implant in new earth. The fire of Hestia was therefore the ultimate symbol of Greek identity. It defined the inner circle of the family, the shared life of the city, and the sprawling network of colonies that dotted the Mediterranean. It was a humble, powerful answer to the chaos of the world. Civilization is not built on laws or armies first, but on a single, shared flame that you agree to keep burning together. In an age of voyages into the unknown, what would you carry to ensure you never truly left home? For the Greeks, the answer was a spark from the hearth, a tiny, mobile sun that could found a city and warm a new world. A pile of fine ash, a pair of unburnt slippers, and the lingering scent of roasted meat. This was all that remained of Countess Cornelia di Bandi in her Italian bedroom in 1731. Her floor was untouched, her bed curtains pristine, yet the noblewoman had been utterly consumed by a fire that seemed to have come from within. Her case is not unique. For centuries, reports of spontaneous human combustion have surfaced in medical journals and newspapers, describing victims reduced to a greasy ash and a limb or two, while the chair they sat in or the bedding around them remained strangely intact. A Mary Riessa in Florida, 1951, a Henry Thomas in Wales, 1980, each scene defies the basic rules of fire, where a blaze hot enough to cremate a body should incinerate everything in the room. In an age before forensic science, the explanation was often theological. Such a death was seen as a divine or demonic punishment, a sign of a life so steeped in sin that the body was purged by holy or infernal fire. The victim, often elderly and fond of drink, was judged morally as much as medically, but modern investigators have pieced together a more physical, if no less eerie, explanation. It is called the wick effect. Imagine a human body as a candle. The initial ignition source is often small and external. A dropped cigarette, a spark from the hearth, a knocked-over lamp. If the victim is incapacitated by alcohol, sleep, or illness, they do not move to extinguish it. The flame begins to burn clothing and skin, melting the subcutaneous fat. This liquefied fat then soaks into the clothing, which acts like the wick of a candle. Now you have a slow, steady, incredibly efficient burn. The body's own fat becomes the fuel, the clothing the delivery system, and the fire, contained by the body's own mass, burns inward with intense, localized heat. This process can last for hours, generating temperatures high enough to calcine bone. Yet because the flame is so contained and fed from within, it often does not spread. Oxygen is drawn in through natural convection, feeding the internal blaze while leaving the surrounding furniture just beyond the intense, focused heat column. It is a gruesome, self-contained cremation. The wick effect explains the bizarre crime scene, the untouched surroundings, the disproportionate destruction, the pools of melted fat. It turns the supernatural into a tragic accident of physiology and physics. Yet, even with this compelling theory, a shiver of the unknown remains. Why are these cases so rare? Why do some victims show evidence of an explosion of heat while others do not? The mystery of spontaneous human combustion endures not because it defies all explanation, but because it represents the ultimate fear of a betrayal from within. We think of fire as an external threat, something we can see and fight. But these stories whisper of a different horror, that under the right, terrible circumstances, the light we carry inside can become the very thing that turns us to dust. Charles Dickens sealed the fate of spontaneous human combustion in the public imagination with a single, unforgettable character. In his novel Bleak House, the miserly alcoholic Mr. Crook meets a gruesome end, discovered as nothing more than a pile of foul-smelling ash, a burnt patch on the floor, and a clinging, greasy soot on the walls. Dickens didn't present this as a mere plot device. He insisted it was a documented fact, even appending a preface citing real-life cases to defend its scientific plausibility. Through his immense literary power, he transformed a bizarre medical anomaly into a potent moral fable. Crook's death was portrayed not as a random accident, but as the logical, almost poetic consequence of a life consumed by greed and spiritual rot. The fire came from within because the man himself was a smoldering heap of internal vice. This fictional treatment did more than any medical journal ever could. It embedded the idea of SHC deep into Western culture, framing it as a mysterious, almost supernatural retribution. For over a century, when a similar death was reported, the shadow of Mr. Crook hung over it, inviting judgment and a shudder of Gothic horror. The mystery had found its story, and that story was far more compelling than dry autopsy reports. This cultural fascination only grew with time, leaping from the page to the screen. 20th century pulp magazines and later television shows like The X-Files seized on spontaneous human combustion as the perfect unexplained phenomenon. It had all the required elements: a bizarre death, a scientific puzzle, and that chilling hint of an unseen internal force. These portrayals often leaned into the supernatural, suggesting everything from psychic energy eruptions to alien intervention. They presented the Wick effect as a boring, skeptical rebuttal from the authorities, while the imagery of a person bursting into flames from nothing fed our deepest fears. This pop culture life cycle reveals something crucial. The scientific explanation, for all its logic, struggles against the power of narrative. The Wick effect is a slow, chemical process. But the story of a human candle, of a fire born from the soul's corruption, or a sudden paranormal event, speaks to something older and more visceral. It connects directly back to every ancient mystery we have explored. The sacred fire that consumed Elijah's sacrifice on Carmel was a divine judgment. The Pythia's trance was an internal fire ignited by the earth's breath. The Aztec new fire was kindled in a human chest. In every case, fire was more than a physical reaction. It was a messenger, a transformer, a bridge between the mundane and the miraculous. Spontaneous human combustion sits at the very end of that long, flickering lineage. It is the modern, secular shell for an ancient, sacred terror. The fear that the element we tamed, the spark we carried from the gods, might still have a will of its own and might one day turn its gaze inward. Our forensics can now diagram the Wick effect with clinical precision, tracing the path of melted fat through cotton fabric. We can call it a tragic accident of physiology and circumstance. Yet when the news report ends, a silent question always remains. Why this person? Why in this chair on this night did the ordinary rules of the world bend so completely? We have replaced the wrath of Baal with the chemistry of lipids, but the awe is unchanged. That lingering doubt, that space between the forensic report and the bizarre evidence, is where the mystery still lives. It proves that our relationship with fire is not a historical artifact. It is a living, breathing dialogue. We have mapped its physics, but we have never fully stripped it of its agency. From the first human who stole a burning branch from a lightning-struck tree to the investigator photographing a scene of inexplicable ash, we have always understood fire as a participant in our story, not just a tool. It warms our homes, forges our metals, and carries our prayers. But in its most mysterious manifestations, it also asks us the oldest questions about life, death, and the unseen forces that flicker at the edges of our understanding. The 30 sacred fires we have walked through are not just relics. They are a continuum of wonder, a testament to a single, enduring truth. As long as a single flame burns in the dark, humanity will gather around it, searching for answers in its light and telling stories in its glow. From the hearths of ancient Rome to the gas vents of the Himalayas, our journey through these 30 mysteries reveals fire as humanity's most powerful and paradoxical symbol. It is the bringer of life and the agent of destruction, a tool of the divine and the damned, a force we have both worshipped and weaponized since the dawn of consciousness. Each story, from the Vestal Virgins' vigil to the Yazidis' rekindled flame, is a chapter in our long, intimate conversation with this primal element. Our ancestors did not just seek to control fire, they sought to understand its soul, to harness its light for protection, its heat for transformation, and its mystery for meaning. They built temples around its eternal glow and empires upon its sacred promise. They saw in its flicker the voice of gods, the fate of nations, and the very spark of their own spirit. This duality is fire's true nature. It forges swords and plowshares from the same metal. It cooks the meal and consumes the home. It illuminates the path and obscures it with smoke. The sacred fires we have explored are not contradictions, but a complete picture. They show us that our relationship with this element has never been simple, because fire itself is not simple. It is a process, a reaction, a living event that exists only by consuming, and in that it holds up a mirror to our own existence. We are drawn to its warmth even as we fear its hunger. We have spent millennia trying to codify its chaos into ritual, to predict its whims through prophecy, and to capture its eternity in a lamp or a legend. In the end, every mystery on this list is a testament to that striving. So we leave you with a final question, one that has smoldered through every story. Which of these ancient flames burned brightest for you? Was it the quiet duty of the hearth, the terrifying spectacle of the new fire ceremony, or the enduring miracle of a lamp that should not have burned? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you have been captivated by these hidden corners of history, be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the past's greatest enigmas. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep your own curiosity.